Howdy, folks. This is David. Welcome back at last to the seventh installment of Adventures in Book Scouting. I'm sorry it's been so long. It's summertime, and I don't have as much time to create new videos as I would like. But I've been fully intending to continue to resume, and today I have a small window of opportunity here. So, and also, I had something pretty remarkable happen to me over the weekend, insofar as making a great find. So I wanted to share that, and also just sort of get back and and resume the with the channel. I've really missed doing it, and there's been a lot going on. Certainly, things that I wish that I had chance to set up, a little time aside to share, but haven't had a chance. But I'm going to try to go through some things. Hope you've all been well. I appreciate you viewing. If you were waiting and wondering where I was, I'm still here, and thanks for returning and to watch. And for those who have commented, thank you for your interest, and especially thanks to my fellow bookseller who commented. uh, After watching me complain about the post office, or having actually talk about the post office more likely, or more aptly complaining about me coming in with a huge group of parcels. He informed me that there is a service. Maybe I'm way late to the game on this, called Pirate Ship, and I'll tell you if you don't know about it. I've been waiting as long as I've been shipping books, as long as I've been an online bookseller, for there to be uh, some kind of service which can generate prepaid shipping for media mail. Until this time, there's you can purchase now on Amazon and Etsy and eBay and PayPal. You can purchase shipping, but if you get an order, if you sell on multiple channels like I do, and you get a direct order through A Books or Libris or Biblio, they don't allow you to print postage in this, so you have to take. Of course, you can go to USPS.com and print uh, priority mail shipping, or if there's international shipping, first class, but not media. I have a feeling that not too far in the future there won't be any more media mail options, but right now it's still the cheapest way to go, and uh, you know, sort of a mainstay of booksellers' reality is using media mail. Anyway, thank you. It's improved my life tremendously. No longer do I actually have to go in and wait in line. Um, I can go if I really want to get the items scanned in to make sure they're in the system, so that if someone claims they didn't receive it, there's a record of it. I can still do that, or because I mostly trust the postal service, or at least you know most times of the year, I can just go to the loading dock around back and drop them off. It's so simple, and I haven't had any lost packages, lost mail, or claims to that ends in the longest time. So I'm good with just going around back, dropping off. At least until something happens to prove me otherwise. Anyhow, um, so one of the main events are things that have happened to me in the interim since I last recorded a video, or a vlog. Is that I went back to that house in Villanova where I had been showing some of the things that I had got from that. It was a house, a private residence, and they, were very nice in just charging me $25 for whatever I wanted to take. And I happened to notice when I was in there, there was some shelves that were, with older books. The things I got was terrific. I'm very happy with the return on those books, and I've all got them all processed. But and I asked about those when I was there, and they said, well, they weren't sure what they were going to do with those. They had been in the family a long time. They were clearly had I knew a lot of them had higher values, and I didn't really get to look at them. I didn't ask to look at them. I just noticed that they were there. Saw the shelf in the distance. Was not able to see specific content or titles, but in any case, the person I had dealt with sent me or contacted me about some other books that they had found apart from the ones that I had seen on the shelf, and asked if I would be interested in picking those up, no added expense. I saw there was a hardcover edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, so I suppose I could have asked. I was like, "Hey, could you check to see if what printing that is?" But I knew that even if it looked like an older title, as most of the books I had seen in the house were. I figured even if it's not a first, which of course is worth until thousands of dollars, it had a dust jacket. Even if it's a fairly early printing or even a book club, which it turned out to be a book club, still be worth my while just for that alone. And there were some other interesting things, maybe like a dozen titles. So I said, okay, yeah, sure, I'm happy to come pick those up. And this was at least a month ago, and I'm trying to recall if I had arranged at the time. Maybe she had asked me if I was interested in looking at those other books they had, the older books. I think in advance I knew I was going to be looking at them. So when I went to pick those other books up, I was also came right. I remember now that I went knowing that I would be looking at the older titles as well, and it was very, very evident very soon after I started looking at these books, these older titles, that these were valuable indeed. That there had been somebody or more than one person in the family who was a serious collector. Not only were the titles, I remember the books in pretty good shape, even though they were very dusty and had a lot of foxing or the oxidation spotting on the topic from really just having sat in a pretty humid environment for a long period of time, and the dust also has its effect on the books. But other than that, they were beautifully bound. In fact, they were specialty bindings, which means that they were books that were sort of custom bound, sort of in a one of a kind fashion. There were in the later 18th century onto the early to mid, or possibly beyond. I'm sure that it's still done, but their specialty binding still is a thing, to use a newfangled phrase. But in those days, there were several very noteworthy binderies, both in the UK, probably elsewhere in Europe and in the world, and the United States, that would take books and give them a very fine binding, like well, to give you an example, because I've already run through and sold most of these things on eBay around at auction, but there's a couple of instances of things that did not sell. So I'll just hold this up and give you, rather than describe it, I'll show you the kind of book I'm talking about. It's a leather binding. In this case, it's called a 3/4 leather binding, because this part that has the marbled design is more like a regular, more standard hardcover board. But the rest of this, the spine with these are called the raised bands on the spine, the decorative gilt design. The spine is leather, and all the the lighter colored areas of the book are leather, so it actually comes out to be a 3/4. There's also books that were full leather that didn't have the marble design. I feel like these are books these are the most attractive. These are some of the most attractive, beautiful books that I've come across or that I've handled personally. They don't have the some of the most I guess venerated books as far as for their decorative qualities are the ones that have the the illustrations on the page edges. You know, I can't. The name escapes me or the term escapes me of what that's of what that is when they have there's illustrations that are printed right on the page edges. But um, this book in question was a I have seven other volumes. This is called a History of France. Missing the first volume, it has volumes 2 through 8, and because it's not a full set, I guess it did not generate any bids on eBay. I was surprised because just for the appearance and condition of these books alone, I would think they would be highly desirable. And I sold many books that were in this vein that had this kind of appearance over the last several weeks. But trying to run back through my train of thought here. Yeah, so I can see right away. So in describing the book and what kind of book, the specialty bindings, and in most cases with these kind of things, just you want to make sure that this is not the original issue. It also had these beautiful marbled end papers as well. And this, in addition, this family who owned these books, quite a lineage, and there was like many genealogical books. These were Mayflower descendants, and they have traced their history, done intensive research, and had a lot of genealogical books. And also, in addition to being descendants of a Bradford family, there's also the Lippincott family. This is mainline Philadelphia, old money. Lippincott was in this case, it has a bookplate of Walter Lippincott, who was, I believe, the son of J.B. Lippincott, who was a publisher in Philadelphia, a publishing house, a very notable one that later became Philadelphia, New York. I don't believe it is still an active house, but for well over 100 years, this was one of the most prominent publishing houses in the country, in the history of U.S. publishing, and so these books belong to him. Even so, these were not able to generate a bid. I guess maybe I did something wrong. I feel like I must have done something wrong in order for these to not have generated any bids, because to me, I don't. Even though it was not quite a complete set, I don't understand why these would not have been desirable for at least for the starting point that I had them. The opening bid. In any case, these books are also these kinds of books, the specialty bindings. I don't believe that I'll be able to. I don't have the technical know-how at this point to get to hone in really close, but at the very tippy top here, maybe you'll see like something that looks like a smudge or a hair darker than the rest of the page. It's infinitesimally small print that details that gives the provenance of the binder. You have to look really closely. It's usually on one. So this would be called. These are the end papers. The front end paper, the front free end paper. This would be the fly leaf, and this would be the verso, or the opposite of the front free end paper, or the opposite of the fly leaf. Anyway, and sometimes they would be in the rear of the book. But something to check if you ever come across this kind of book. So my point is, with these kind of books, they were originally had a different binding. They were taken to a specialty or specialized bindery that would give it this fine binding. And there were a number of beautiful books, classic titles. There was Edgar Allan Poe, there was Mark Twain, there was Shakespeare, there was Lewis Carroll, and the 2-volume set of, I don't even know if it was 7, it was Alice in Wonderland, and then Through the Looking Glass. And those went for the highest price of any of these books. it was really helpful to have access to these books, and really quite a privilege. But so, in looking at those books, it's very evident that not only were they valuable, but I wouldn't have really been able to know quite what value to place on them, because they're unique items. I mean, you can look on for the printing information and go by that, and if you enter in the title, History of France, it's actually not a particularly this is not a particularly rare set. Some of the books were more scarce or more desirable. Had like the Poe books, for instance, had one was illustrated by Arthur Rackham, so highly desirable edition. Some were limited editions that had the penciled. This is like number 187 of 500 printed copies, and then they had this very unique leather binding to boot. But if you could take a book like this and just enter in the printing information on it, say Bookfinder or Abe Books. I'm trying to find the title page without looking, and I'm not handling the book as the way I should. These pages are very thin, and anyway, it's gonna History of France, and you enter, and then the author and the publisher and the date, and you might get some information about how others are being priced, full sets or individual volumes, but they don't have this kind of binding, so it's not you can't. It's not a simple enough matter of just going to a site, typing in the information, and saying, well, okay, well, I can gauge the value based on what I'm seeing here on the site, because there aren't any others. There really weren't any others in most cases that had this kind of binding. So what I said to the owner, not the original owner, but the owner now, or the executor, I suppose, of the house or the estate. I said, I don't really know. I don't know what I could fairly gauge these, and so forth. Therefore, I don't know. I mean, I could we can agree on an amount to pay, but I think the best thing for you and for me, if you're willing, and I've done consignment for many individuals, and it always astounds me that people are willing to trust me with the books, to take them, list them, pack them, and then forward them the information when they do sell, and it's worked out in many different cases. So this was another. I suggested consignment, wherein we would split the proceeds straight down the middle, 50-50, and I said that I would like to put these up at auction. Maybe some of them probably did not sell for nearly what their value is, but I don't know for sure what the value is. It was a way to make sure that the owner was getting paid promptly. And in a lot of cases, my MO is to just list books, price books, and let them sit until they sell. Forget about them, and then wait for the buyer to come along who will pay the price that you have determined to be the right price, a reasonable and accurate price. It's harder when you're dealing with unique items, when you're dealing with old books. Sometimes price might get driven higher in an auction setting. Sometimes they're not going to sell for as much. It's hard to know. I'm sure for anyone, I'm not as nearly as experienced with eBay as I am with Amazon and Abe Books, but I would think that even far more experienced eBay sellers would tell you probably never really know if you're going to put things up at auction. You never know for sure. You can add a reserve in so that it won't sell below a certain price, or the sale will be nullified if it doesn't reach a certain price, in order to protect yourself. But I haven't ever done that. I just make sure that I'm starting setting the starting bid at a price beneath which I wouldn't find acceptable. So that's the way I operate on eBay. And so as I mentioned, most of the ones that I had up for auction sold, and I'm pretty satisfied. And I think that the owner also was, and that it's actually helping me with the next big purchase that I'm in the process of making. Over the winter, I went to an apartment. Elderly man's wife, whose books that they had passed away, and he wanted to sell the books, and but not looking to sell them all as a lot, because he had all these different people in mind to try to sell to, in case he didn't get the. This guy, the opposite, I suppose, of the person who was willing to let the books go for so little in the house in Villanova. This guy was driving the proverbial hard bargain, and looking to get every penny he could possibly milk out of these books. And if I decide that there are titles I want to pass on, he's got some other people lined up after me, and there's been at least one person before me. So, but the consigned items, as well as the other books I was able to purchase from that household in Villanova, is enabling me to make this other purchase. Really, that's sort of how it goes along. Maybe one time you'll be able to reap the benefits of a really nice estate without having to immediately put the dividends into the next estate purchase. But ultimately, you think that you're building up higher and higher. That's the idea. And I just wanted, before I move along in my narrative here, I'm sorry, I'm not really showing too many books today at this point. Wanted to just show one more thing that I had taken for consignment and didn't sell, and I'm not sure exactly what's going to become of these books, whether I'll return them, or that the woman said I was free to keep them and do what I want with them, but I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. I would like to at least give her something, or at least down the road when they sell, or even in the interim, even though they did not meet the minimum bid that I had set. I know that they still have value. This book, not one of the specialty bindings, but an antiquarian, a legitimately antiquarian book. This is a book that I don't find a record of being anywhere else available in the online world. It's called Campaigns of Napoleon, Volume 1. There's a Volume 2 that exists in the original edition, which is published in 1810, and that person is selling their Volume 2 for $1,000. Now, I put the minimum bid on eBay at $99.95, thinking, well, this is a rare book. It is a 200-plus-year-old book. That's pretty good starting bid. I have a good feeling this has a chance to get bid up. Napoleon, a pretty, books on a very obviously famous historical figure. Books are on Napoleon. I just recently, over the weekend, I went to a house, more on that later, that had a Napoleonic library, books all about Napoleon. But I'm sure that person would have loved to get his hands on this book. And it could have been for far less than $1,000, which is, I don't know, is it worth $1,000? It's worth something. This is the only copy in the original form that exists, as far as I can tell. Maybe it exists somewhere where, in a bookshop where they're not putting their books online. Very well could be the case. But if you're sitting somewhere in the middle of the country, you don't have access to that, those kind of bookshops. This would be your only option. The original journals, each by a general officer of the 18 campaigns of the Emperor Napoleon, published Volume 1, and I don't believe you're going to be able to see the year, but it's 1810. It's kind of an example of the kind of stuff that was on these shelves, gathering dust for many decades, I guess. And I can't. I don't believe this is a leather binding. I can't remember. I had researched it. There might be someone watching who is more of an expert in bindings, deals with antiquarian books more, and could probably just tell by looking at it what this is, and they're probably screaming at me in numb school. Don't you've done this clearly, blah blah blah. But I don't remember. It had been a few weeks back, and I'm talking to you. I would have probably remembered, but anyway, just to show you the kind of things that were at this house that I was dealing with. Not the sorts of run-of-the-mill things that you would go to a library sale and find. But yes, it was really exciting, and I'm excited. It was really a great privilege to be able to deal in books like that. And I really owe the people who, the woman in particular in charge of the estate, a great deal of gratitude for entrusting me with those, and she feels the same way toward me. But so there was that, and so I also want to mention over this past weekend, I mentioned that I'm in the process of purchasing this other collection, a terrific collection in Center City, Philadelphia, which is what we call the downtown Philadelphia. You can't call it, if you call it downtown Philadelphia, they'll just know you're not from there. You got to call it Center City. It's an apartment house where books have resided for many years, and I'm not sure if I had mentioned this collection in any previous episodes, but it's almost exclusively nonfiction. There's a lot of books pertaining to Asian arts and coins, currency, costume, culture of all kinds, history, poetry, a lot of scientific, more in the not hard, but more like popular science, but and a lot of books pertaining to cults, UFOs, and it's hard for me to tell whether the owner was actually I don't know if you can hear the bookstore cat down here making some noise. I guess she wants to be on camera again. Yeah. She's probably just hungry. Yeah, I'm not sure if the person in question was a believer in all these kind of things that I'm seeing the books, the subjects of the books, or just was a serious, was studying them sociologically. In any case, it's a really interesting array of scholarly, uncommon nonfiction books. I mean, it's sort of an online bookseller's dream to find this stuff. You go to any book sale, and people are going to be swarming towards the nonfiction sections. And this collection is, outside of the poetry, it's like probably over 95% nonfiction, and there's not a lot of filler in there. The downside of the collection is that it's the man wants top dollar for the books. I mean, when I went earlier, I picked out some of what I thought was the best of it without actually having the opportunity to look stuff up. I went home and I made some notes. I went home, looked it up. Felt like I was willing to pay what he was his asking price for those books. A lot of these were the oversized art books, coffee table size books. And I've definitely made my money back on those. So now I went back for, the I don't know how many, had to be in the thousands of books that were left that were just regular sized. Books not necessarily older, but maybe from the latter part of the 20th century into the 21st century. So, and I also have three or four, maybe more full collections, large collections of books sitting in my basement ready to be processed. Some of them I've had for 3 years. I mean, and I just keep on getting more in the meantime. buying more collections. Uh, it would be, you know, I couldn't argue very hard with someone who would say the intelligent thing to do would just be to stop buying and concentrate on what you already have. My reply to that, and sometimes I believe it more than others, is that, well, I feel like it's conservative added perspective to just say, well, I'm going to close up shop. I've got enough to deal with. You may be closing the door on opportunities to get things better than what you already have if you take that approach. Is what I tell myself and tell other people. And especially in the immediate wake of spending a lot of money, taking in a lot more books, it's harder at that point to convince myself to just to keep on looking, keep on buying. At those times I'm more inclined to say, okay, that's it for a while. I'm going to stop. I'm not even going to look. But the fact of the matter is, I subscribe to this to a weekly email sent out by estatesales.net, and I hadn't I hadn't discontinued the email or shut or unsubscribed to it, so there it was, and I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to just look at what's coming up. The sales are all there. You fill out give them a radius of how many miles you want to be notified of estate sales in your area, and then they give you everything that's happening on that given weekend. I get it on Thursday, so all the sales for the weekend you can kind of review. There's photographs, there's information about all the different sales in the region, and it's always interesting to look at the contents of people's homes, right? And I basically try to just focus on the ones with books and look for bookcases with a lot full of books, or something that just sort of gives away that this is worth your while, especially if it's not all that far away, and if I have a chance of I have a window of opportunity to get there. There's not any family plans that weekend. Maybe I can get there and check it out. Well, so I did this, and most weeks, honestly, I'm not moved to really pursue much, if anything. I don't go to estate sales all that often. Maybe once a month, maybe once every other month. Am I compelled to go out to an estate sale? Mostly because I realize that, having been to a number of them, the pricing works different than if you go to a library sale, and they don't you don't know the prices in advance. Some companies are more reasonable than others, but usually they're asking higher prices than friends of the library sale, or even really a private collector. I mean, honestly, if they're selling per book, they're asking for the moon in most cases. And a lot of times that I go, well, when based on some of the topics I've reviewed about going to bag sales at the end of the library sales, that's typically when I've showed up to a lot of estate sales as of the last day, when you're going to find discounted prices. In this case, I found something, wow, it really jumped out at me. It was a house in Lambertville, New Jersey, which is about an hour north of where I live, just across the river from New Hope, Pennsylvania, in Bucks County. And in fact, I also saw on Facebook Marketplace, on a separate listing that was not on the estatesales.net, there was an estate sale listing in New Hope's for the same day, and it was an artist's studio, and the artist had passed away, and then the family was selling his books. So my son, who's between first and second grade this summer, is attending an arts camp in the morning only. So I have a very short window during the week. Any weekday, unless something is like right in the neighborhood, I won't have a chance to really even consider it. I'm the person who has to drop off and pick up. But on this given day, he was staying till 2 o'clock, a little bit later. I had a little bit bigger window, so it sort of worked out. And I thought, well, this first house I saw on the site, theestatesales.net had so many books. I thought, well, even if I go and it turns out the prices are too high, I can go to this other place in New Hope and maybe get something out of it. And maybe I shouldn't be looking to buy any books at all right now, but these two, I do have the time, and they look really promising. A lot of kind of books that you're not going to run into a lot, you know. Um, the one thing that sort of called out to me from the house in Lambertville was that there were a lot of baseball books. I'm a big baseball fan. I have a big baseball book collection, so I also figured, well, maybe there's some interesting memorabilia, some interesting books, even if the prices are high as a dealer, maybe as a collector or a person just interested in. Maybe I'll find something of interest here. Um, and You know, just looking at the pictures, I could see there were some really interesting things that I had never really seen in hardcover editions. So after some internal debate, I ended up going. This was on Friday. I'm recording this on the following Tuesday. And I went, and the estate company I had I had gone to an estate sale that they've or a couple of different estate sales they've run before, and the woman who runs it is nice, and I had recalled that her prices were pretty reasonable. But getting to this place, and a lot of times you go to an estate, someone's in the contents of a house, and books are a very small part of it. There's not a lot of it's mostly people are interested in the furniture or the art, framed art, or other more, I suppose, lucrative household items, and there may be some books involved. Sometimes there are large collections, but usually books are on the periphery. Well, in this case, the books were really the bulk of what was there in this house. There wasn't a lot of, it wasn't that big of a house. It was an old house that had been redone at some point, to what was considered modern at the time, and maybe in the 60s or in the early 70s with the wood paneling and such. It was pretty gloomy interior, and pretty dusty, pretty dirty place. I guess the man who would own the books must have just run out his days there, and hadn't been looked at like it hadn't been lived in or cleaned in a very long time. It's very grimy. But what I mean to say was pretty much all that was there were books. Had a pretty large CD collection as well, and also a lot of VHS cassettes, and a lot of military, like board games. But the rest was books. So, but upon arrival, my worst fear was confirmed. Almost all the books were had different color stickers on them, and that means that they were sort of micromanaging the sale and saying, well, these books are, they have a very complicated chart, with, books with an orange sticker are $10, books with a pink sticker are $20, or, books with a green sticker are $5, books with a blue sticker are especially so, but the saving grace was that paperback. Well, so the minimum price, you can hear this rain coming down right now. The minimum price for a hardcover was $5, and there were really some nice books there. The larger books were priced $15, $10, $20. There was a huge section on Napoleon books. So he was a collector of Napoleon as well as baseball books, and also had a lot of old comic strip humor type books, and some art books. But and a lot of really nice classics, I guess. All sorts of like esoteric literature. It's sort of ran the gamut. So I was not. I mean, I had pretty limited time. I was, I had in the back of my mind that I was hoping to maybe get to this other sale in New Hope. So I told myself, well, just dig around for whatever paperbacks might be of interest. And that's what I did. I focused on the paperbacks. And I went through the house, finding a few things here and there. I got to the last room where a lot of the baseball books were. And I also noticed that, like, spilling out of some closets, in addition to the military games, there were um, some baseball, like tabletop games, like from the 50s, 60s, 70s, statistic oriented. I can't remember it's an acronym or I'd heard of it, being a baseball fan myself, but these were like really uh, intricate, um, strategic kind of games that involved different sets of cards and all sorts of different probabilities and so that with with that in mind, and he had all sorts of things that were just mail order stuff sent to him in that vein, like um, compilations of statistical packets that some of which pertain to the game, some of which didn't. So I wasn't surprised when my eyes fell on this stack of books that was sandwiched between two bookcases. And they were these the Bill James baseball abstract. Um, you know, Remarkable, although not surprising, but I've seen these books. I mean, Bill James is by now a very, at least in the in baseball circles or sports circles, a pretty prominent name. But it's not to a generalist estate company, I guess. Um, there were all sorts of books that were marked higher price. Something about them, in gave them reason to think that they had higher value, and they were researched and priced as such. Um, it always sort of surprises me that there's such a devaluing of paperbacks. Like, there's no way that any softcover book could could compete in value with a hardcover. So the default price for a hardcover, it was $5 for a paperback of any size, $1. I mean, a lot of times you go to a library sale, and the discrepancy is $2 for a hardcover and $1 for paperback. A little more reasonable, I suppose. But in this case, it was all the way from 5 to 1. So, they didn't even. There were no paperback books that had any kind of specialty pricing. So, they took all that time to do the research for any number of books, and priced the books accordingly, and no one would have given any thought to this pile of books, baseball abstracts from the 1980s, you know, annual books. What could be more worthless than an annual, think of travel guides from the 1980s. Think of pretty much anything, that was an annual guide. It's got to be outdated information, right? Like, what, that's the last thing anyone would possibly think I would hold value. So, but I spotted these books, and I of course, knew what they were. I've seen them many times, and I knew enough by now to know that. So these were the Bill James baseball abstracts. Bill James, sort of a pioneer in the game. There's an organization called SABR, Society for American Baseball Research, that was formed in 1971. And Bill James came along later in the decade with these abstracts, which were like which came to really be an influential factor in baseball and really all of sports in their emphasis of statistical data. And it took a long time for his ratings, for his methodology to catch on. But once they did, eventually these became best-selling books, and eventually the influence spread to professional baseball, people who worked in front offices, all the way to the major league operations of the Oakland Athletics, which famously became the subject of a book by Michael Lewis called Moneyball, and the film with the same name with Brad Pitt playing the A's general manager. So anyway, suffice it to say, these books were very important and very influential. And you know, if you don't know baseball, you might not know that. Even if you know books, you still might not be inclined. There's something would jump out at you and saying, this is a book that we need to research and price accordingly. So these were ignored not only by the estate company, but by any other book dealer who had been in that house, and there were many. So the abstract was published by Ballantine Books in this format, this like oversized format, between 1982 and 1988. The ones, early on, when I first discovered the abstracts at a book sale, even the ones from the mid 80s, 84, 85, 86, still had pretty good value. They don't now. Even the 83, which I'm holding up now, it's a $20 book, even in a kind of a rough condition. So that one still has a little bit. Then you get back to the 82, and so this was the first of them that was picked up and distributed by a publishing house, Ballantine Books. And this has a higher value still. This is in kind of a shabby condition. I have it listed on Amazon at $80 in 8 books at 100. That's not where the story ends. There were 5 years previous to the abstracts being published by Ballantine that Bill James published them himself, self-published editions from 1981, 1980, 1979, 1978, 1977. And seeing the stack, and it started with, I think it started with the 86 that I kept going under, the pile, looking under. And I was hoping, I said, I hope it has like the 82, 83 ones. They were there. And when I got to that point, I thought, that's great. I mean, I found something here for, at least, it was something that I came here, I know I'm going to make some money on. This was a pretty good find. I kept looking, and I had never seen these before. So I keep looking into the pile, and you notice that the appearance becomes very different, because these are the self-published ones now. And these are the original ones. I think at least the 78 and 77 were reprinted at some point. The giant print, going diagonally in the cover. It says reprint, so that you can't miss it. These don't have that. 81, 1980. As these get older, they get more rare. 1979, 1978. See that they were just stapled, mimeographed, typed by hand, mimeographed copies, and all the way down to 1977, the original baseball abstract. Doing some reading on this, there were very few. Bill James couldn't have been more obscure at the time, working in Lawrence, Kansas, put this together. There wasn't a whole lot of, there was no statistical revolution or movement in baseball then. Hope you can hear me over this rainstorm that's going on outside. Quite something. So I was just amazed. So I, doing the reading on this, apparently only 75 of these were ever sold and distributed, and every single person who ordered one through the mail, Bill James wrote a personalized note to, and here it is. It was right inside the book. It says, "Dear Mr. Gibson," that's the man's name who lived in Lambertville, and I guess he was an SABR member from way back. It says, "Hope you enjoy the abstract. If not, let me know, and I'll send you your money back. Certainly wouldn't want to get a bad name around the society. And thanks, Bill James." So I'm not sure exactly what I'm sitting on here because I cannot find any evidence of prior sales. I know that the reprint apparently is sold for $1,000. This is the original, and there just aren't that many that have materialized. I've contacted SABR to try to help me with gauging the value, and just to see if anyone in the organization or members might, if they can spread the word that I have this or they have these 5 self-published editions, if anyone would be interested in purchasing directly. So kind of waiting to hear in that regard. My initial thought was, well, try it on eBay. If there's no comps, there's no value to be known. Let's just see what it will bear in the open market, and eBay's usually the best thing for that. My wife suggested, why don't you might want to even contact an auction house about this, and then she suggested SABR before I did anything else, because this is pretty unusual territory for me. The highest priced books I've ever really dealt with were around in the $2,000 range, and I really believe that these books grouped together, in particular the 1977 abstract, has an excellent chance to go well beyond that, which would be amazing. I mean, just so, and it's of course I certainly intend to come back on here in the future and let everybody know how it all panned out. Maybe somebody knows something about it. Maybe someone has information to pass along. That would be great if you do, before I do anything with it. Or maybe you have some suggestions of what you do with a truly rare item, which this is. And it's just, it's a great thing, but it also, considering, one, the fact that, it was just sitting there, in its dusty pile, sandwiched between 2 bookcases, utterly overlooked in a house full of things that were marked up to the moon, things that were priced, had all sorts of exorbitant price tags on them. And, once again, it's the things that everyone overlooks. And also, too, I mean, just the gratification, I guess, of just what I said, sort of being borne out. If you just shut the door and say no more, you won't have I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I never would have found this if I had just said, well, I've got enough. Let's just, put a lid on it. But, sort of all sensibility to the contrary. I went out looking in, and I was, I'd say I was rewarded and sort of, feel very justified in my thinking now, saying, well, I have to relearn the lesson any number of times, but it does make sense. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what you might be passing up. I mean, you may, if you have a lot that you haven't yet processed, a lot that you're sitting on like I do, okay, maybe there are some sales you feel like you can skip. Some things that are, more high risk or marginal or further distance, you'd say, well, I could probably afford to skip this one. But if it's not, if the distance isn't too great and it looks promising and it looks like stuff that you wouldn't have the opportunity to to be able to buy, to access all that often, and it's, you can't just put people, you can't put these things on hold until it's convenient for you. You've got to get them when they're available. So anyway, that's my I suppose it seems like wisdom now is because I went and had this great find and this great fortune, and we'll see what comes of it. But I just wanted to share that, and I will just leave it there for now, and hope to be talking to you again in the near future. I can't promise, but certainly one thing for sure, I will be continuing with this channel with these installments whenever I can. I really do enjoy it. I enjoy being able to share the books that I find, and the information that I've accumulated, I guess, over time, and the interaction that it affords me with fellow booksellers or just curious book lovers, or potential booksellers. I like the idea of it. I'm going to continue with it, so I hope that I'm able to come back at you with more content in the near future. But thanks for watching and listening, and please feel free to chime in with any thoughts, or comments that you might have. I appreciate anyone's attention to this channel, and for hanging in for the duration if you've made it this far. Okay, so once again, my name's David, and the name of this channel is Adventures in Book Scouting. There certainly have been some adventures lately, and I'm sure there will be more. Hope to talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.